This matter of life and death, our eternal journey into the now moment. And as you all should know by now, I'm fascinated with the near-death research, so I'm going to use part of that today. My fascination with near-death experiences stems from the insights they provide into the nature of the soul. Although these reports are primarily anecdotal, they reveal common themes. And that is my interest. I was writing about this 4 different influences in my life, and this is one of them, one of the major influences. I put it about probably number 3 or 4. It's my own mystical experience was the first one, and the study in the mystical teachers through the ages. Emily Curtis Hopkins and Evelyn Underhill have been 2 big influences. Near-death studies and critical biblical scholarship. Those 4 things have really shaped my understanding of what we are as a soul, how we view the Bible, because, a lot of our thinking, whether we like to admit it or not, has come from what we've learned from other people teachings from the Bible. And when you ask any question, what does the Bible teach about death, for example, you'll find several viewpoints. There's not just one. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, those were 2 major parts of Judaism in the world of Jesus. And the Sadducees believed when you're dead, you're dead. That's it. No resurrection, no life after, no nothing. And it's kind of funny, but they were absolutely careless, could care less about the coming Messiah. They didn't believe in it. The Pharisees began to develop the concept of resurrection. They think around 300 BC. It goes back quite a ways. But they believed in life after death, or they didn't believe in it in the same way we think of it. They thought the body and the soul were connected, and that the body was actually resurrected. That when they talk about resurrection, they're not talking about a spiritual thing. But that whole culture, who was under the influence of Greek philosophy, the Hellenized culture, would have been exposed to Plato and all of these guys that did understand the soul as something separate from the body, something that would survive death of the body. So there's a lot of mixture of thought that we see just in a couple of eras in the Bible. But then you go way back, and it's there's just all kinds of views. And so it's helped me to step outside of that, and with the advent of the near-death research and a lot of people coming forward now and talking about it without fear being locked up in a mental institution someplace. And believe it or not, that has occurred not all that long ago, where they may not have been locked up in an institution, but one experiencer said their doctor put them on a psychiatric, recommended them to a psychiatric counseling, and because they just simply didn't believe, they held the materialistic view of the human being, that which we are as a soul is generated by the brain, and there's no way you could be laying on the operating table and viewing your body from the corner of the room, the ceiling. There's no way, so you probably need some help if you're talking about that kind of thing, especially with great enthusiasm. And that's how they always do it. They feel like they need to tell somebody what they've gone through. When I had my experiences, and when I found Emily Cady's book, Lessons in Truth, I had a very deep need to talk to somebody about it. But I didn't know who to talk to, because I was surrounded by Baptists in the first place, and didn't really think they would go for it. Well, I thought everybody would, actually. That was my feeling. I thought everybody would understand this. And as I have told you, I gave the book Lessons in Truth to my Baptist minister, and he said it was the work of the devil, so I knew I was barking up the wrong tree on that one. But when you have these awakenings, you want to share it with somebody. That's the thing. And when somebody has a near-death experience, it's the most profound thing that's ever happened to them. And they want to share it with somebody. Fortunately, now there's a way to do that, through these different conferences they have. They're probably in every city in the United States now. But my fascination with that is not death. It's not dealing with death. It's looking beyond that to say these people step over, they come back, they tell their stories, that we don't die. And so that has helped me reach that. When I wrote the book, The Complete Soul, that was a big influence on that book, is I believe the soul is complete. And even if it's not complete now, it is so far advanced from what most of us think that we couldn't work for 1,000,000 years reading books and catch up with where we are at the soul level already. And why that's closed down, I don't know. That's another one of the interesting parts of the study, of people try to explain why the consciousness is so shut down, why we can't have live with this big awareness of this glorious universe we live in. Why are we so restricted by the functions of the body? And that to me is kind of a mystery. But it's also comforting to know there's something beyond this very small vision that most of us have, comparatively speaking. That the time will come and we'll step out of it and we'll see that same kind of thing. But it raises a lot of good questions. Why would we choose to be here? Why would we choose a body that limits so much the soul? And I think that's kind of an ongoing question for me. Diane sent Carl Jung's near-death experience, which I have read before, and I used part of that in my book, Complete Soul. But he was a brilliant psychiatrist. Was he a psychiatrist? Psychologist. Brilliant, and people quote him all the time today. But I had a minister friend that was kind of chiding me about my interest in near-death research. He said, it's just anecdotal. It's just stories people are telling. We don't know if it's true or not. So I sent him Carl Jung's story. And, he's a very credible person, but he had this phenomenal experience and said it was definitely real, one of the most real. He didn't want to come back from it. And he said it took him a long time to figure out he would come back, he would look out the window and from his hospital bed and just say it looked like a black and white drawing, that I didn't even want to be a part of. And he said it felt like I had to go back into the box of identity, that we have walking around on this earth. And that's compared to what he had just experienced, this vast awareness. He actually, as many of these people do, rose above the earth. And somebody that read his description later said he was describing Earth from about 40,000 feet, and back then nobody had been that high. And nobody knew what that would look like, but he's described Asia, I think it was, and just, different things he saw from that perspective. It just blows our minds, we can't figure out how in the world that could happen. You don't have a spaceship, you don't have an airplane, you don't have anything, you're just floating, just you out there. Just a point of consciousness. But he's one of many very credible people who come back and tell their story. So that helps me not want to go there, but to understand better this, what's this all about. So it's helped me a lot. Two strikingly consistent themes that emerge are the advanced and immortal nature of the soul. It's the closest we can come to eyewitness accounts of what it means to be a spiritual being. I think we all can affirm that and do affirm that. We like that feeling. I'm a spiritual being going through a human experience. Nobody knows for sure who said that quote. It's attributed to a lot of people. But I really like it myself. But it's a statement. And when a person actually goes into that awareness, where they have that experience, they come back saying, I am a spiritual being going through a human experience. It's a whole different thing. They know what that means. And, we don't want to downplay the earth experience, but there's no question in my mind that we are extremely limited in this body. And that for whatever reason, I think we chose to undertake this journey. And a lot of these people say that, Earth is very difficult. When they go and come back, they'll say they've talked to people that know that they were in a body and that they admire them for the bravery of taking on a physical body, because it's such a difficult thing to do. And so, it's a whole different perspective, that we don't normally think of. Do you consider yourself a hero or heroine because you took on a physical body? We wouldn't think in those terms. So it's good that something stimulates us to do that. I would not have ever thought of that on my own unless I read several people saying that's what happens, that's what they encounter. It's a whole different perspective. And so it makes me think, I'm considered a hero by, a whole realm of souls that they're afraid to even try what I've done. I don't see myself in that way, but I try. I try to think, what is that perspective? That's a whole different way of thinking. And it makes me think also, everybody says it's very brief. This experience is very brief. And have you ever been in a job you really didn't like, and then you come to the end of it? You got a few days left, and you're thinking, well, that really wasn't so bad. It wasn't near as bad as I thought. I've been in a couple of those. And it's just funny how your perspective changes when you know you're not going to be bound by that condition anymore, and you start thinking in a wider way, a wider range. So I think that's what we do on Earth. The more we think, I'm not of this earth, I'm here now. And sometimes it feels very difficult. Sometimes it feels like a real challenge, a real burden, just to get up in the morning and live this life. But if you also think this is just a flash, it's just a quick flash in the pan. Don't you feel that way with your life now? Just looking back on your youth and all the things you've been through, all the different phases of life. We've reincarnated many times. I think of the different ministries. We've been in 5 different ministries, and I think of those as different incarnations. Different experiences. It's like incarnating into a body in that ministry. And in Grand Junction, we've incarnated twice. We had the place over on 12th Street, and then we're here again. It's a completely different life. So it's like a whole different incarnation. But there's a continuity with all of it. I've always been I've always been me. But I've gone through all these different phases. I've met, thousands of people. Some good, some not so good, and just, have had a lot of different kinds of experiences. So, but I think back on a couple of them, it seemed like we would never get out of them. We would never leave. And yet, I can barely remember, a lot of the details around them now. Now it's a part of the past. So I think when our day comes, when we step off this planet, it's going to be the same thing. We'll look back. I think that's part of probably the value of the life review that people talk about. It's looking back at where you've been, kind of a walk down memory lane, and just say, did I do my best, and could I have done better, and all that kind of thing. I don't know how I'm going to handle that one. I don't really want to remember everything. I don't want to remember, it's just, but they say you do, and it's all done without judgment. That you look at your own life and you think, well, I could have done better on that situation. But to think, as they say, it's every thought and every person you affected, all of their thoughts on how you affected them. And it takes about, a quarter of a second for all that to play back. I don't know how that works. We think our computers are pretty fast, but we've got something going on that's a heck of a lot faster. But the point of all of this is we want to get the 30,000 foot view of life while we're here. If we can kind of get that idea that there's a lot more to us than we just kind of think in our day-to-day living. Physical traumas, surgical complications, disease, and suicide are among the commonest causes of death. Of these, suicide is perhaps the most controversial. Some religions consider it a sin. I think that's unfortunate, that we would put that on anybody. Many years ago, it was in December of 1990. There was a woman, Nancy Cruzan, in Springfield, Missouri. She actually was from Carthage, Missouri, had a car wreck and was in a vegetative state for 8 years. Showed no signs of awareness at all. Just kept alive on life support. And her parents finally decided to pull the plug. And when they did, the religious community rose up like the Gestapo. They were picketing, they were causing all kinds of problems for this family that's, making this horrendous decision to bring their daughter's life to an end in that state. And yet, the fundamental Christian says when you die and you go to heaven, it's a pretty nice place. And I'm not really sure why they would fight that, but they did. And I got a call from a television news station that asked if I would come on and talk about our church's views of that, the right or wrong of pulling the plug. And so I did. I didn't feel like I was any kind of an expert on it, but went into the station, and then they had a Christian fundamentalist on another camera somewhere else. I don't know where they were. I'm glad we were not in the same room, but my attitude was you can't really legislate stuff like this. You've got to take each case as it comes. If I were those parents, I would probably see it very differently than I would the fundamentalists that were raising Cain outside, with their signs and all the other stuff they were doing. But in their thinking, it's absolutely wrong to end life because it's unnatural. And what I said, well, it's unnatural to keep this person alive. They would have died if you would have just let them go. She would have died 8 years ago. There was no chance she was going to survive that car crash. But they kept her alive. So, what do you do with that? It's an interesting dilemma, and we all have to deal with it. My mother, when she reached the end of her life, the last month was very difficult. And none of us wanted her to go. But there came a time when, you just know it's time. And she knew, and, it just becomes very clear. You want to let them go because you look at the quality of life they're having right there. And consider with my near-death studies how much better her life would be if she let go. To me it's a no-brainer, let her go. The car that I drive used to be owned by a man who did a assisted suicide, medically assisted suicide. Many of you know about that. But he suffered from cancer and went through all the treatment and just got where, I don't want to take another step. It's too hard. Life is just no good. The quality of life is not good. So he had some kind of a brew that he was given, and when he decided, I'm going to go today at 10 o'clock in the morning, he did. And our daughter Audrey was with him when he went through that experience, and she watched the whole thing. But you'll hear people talk about that now as if it's a crime, if it's something horrible. And just prolonging somebody's life when they're suffering like that, to me, what do we do with our pets, when they get to a certain point? It's a humane thing to take them in and put them down. And we did that with a dog we had for 14 years, and I couldn't do it. Beth did it. She took the dog, and I could not handle that because it was just a very traumatic thing. But I knew it was the right thing because she was so out of it. She wouldn't even chase the tennis ball anymore, and that's a problem when you reach that point. But anyway, it's something all of us have to look at. And I've had funerals for suicides that seemed like there was a kid that shot himself because he just didn't like what was going on in his teen life, and told his parents, I'll come back as somebody else. I'm not happy with who I am now. They were just absolutely livid, over the whole thing, and it was sad to see that. And then others, it's just there comes a time when that's probably the best decision, because there's no cure, there's no help. And I can't say what I would do in that situation, but I would not want to X off that possibility. If there's just no hope for, making myself better in some way. And here's the interesting thing, those who survive suicide and return with a near-death experience tell a different story. They don't talk about having committed a sin. They're not judged for their action. They're greeted with the same unconditional love all report, and they're sent back or choose to come back to complete their reason for incarnating in the first place. So that was kind of a surprise to me. There was one woman that had a horrible life. She was a drug addict and all that, and she started thinking, I've gone as far with this as I want to go, I'm going to end it. So she started accumulating prescription drugs, and she had a lot of them. And she described how she crushed them all up in a powder and bought a fifth of whiskey and she described eating that stuff and drinking that, made me want to have a near-death experience right then. But she managed to not kill herself, but have a near-death experience. She crossed over. But that crossing over opened her mind in a way that caused her to completely change who she was, her previous life. And so she was not judged in any way. It was nothing but absolute love, she said, just complete unconditional love. So from a religious point of view, and I've been told this myself, that suicide is a sin, that you're going to go to hell if you do it. These people prove otherwise, and that is one of the benefits of looking at stories like this. When we're listening to ministers talk about this or that being a sin, that to me does not hold a candle to somebody who's actually been there, who stepped over and seen it for themselves and described it. And they're telling the truth because they were so absolutely miserable prior to that drove them to that decision, that they're not making this up. It's a real experience. And to me, that is more valid than any minister opening the Bible. And, we went to my mother's funeral, and all we heard was scripture after scripture after scripture. And that had nothing to do with what I think about life after death and the continuation. I don't want to hear all that crap. I've read it all, and when I read it from a different point of view. And I'm not saying Scripture is crap. I'm just saying that the way it's presented, it makes your mind go a certain direction with God, and God is not there. That's not what God is. God is much broader than that. So I've said many times, you can't mess this life up. And these people that do mess their life up and decide to end it, don't mess it up. They find that their life is not messed up. They have this awakening, come back, and they pick up things and start from a completely new place. And many of them enter into counseling and stuff as counselors, telling people, shouldn't do this. You don't need to do this. The impression we're given is that those who do not come back continue their journey in absolute love. Those who do come back are adamant in saying that suicide is not a viable option. Many will actually go into suicide counseling as counselors, by the way, to help others consider alternatives. And what they say is that you don't kill yourself. You don't end it. You're still alive. You still go on. So there are better alternatives. And again, this thing that people hear is, it's not your time. And many of the suicide cases I've heard, they're told that exact same thing. What are you doing here? Trying to cheat the system, trying to go home before you're supposed to. There's things you need to learn, so you're going to go back. And sometimes they say it's that stern. They're told in no uncertain terms, you're not done. Stop cheating. You're going back. So that, to me, again, is a whole different perspective I never would have thought of, in any way. But that would not be true for all people, because not all people come back. I talked about that last week. And so who are we to decide what's right and wrong about all of that? We have our limited views about this whole picture. But that, to me, is refreshing. When it's my time, I'll go. And before then, I won't. So why would I worry about death? And almost 100% of the people that go through this lose their fear of death. And more important, they lose their fear of living. Many of us are afraid to live. Many of us are afraid what's going to happen next. And we try to protect ourselves and all, but it's just, that's why I'm interested in this. It opens up a whole new way of thought. And some of the stories are just really fascinating. Though life can be a struggle, those who have faced death accompanied by an NDE, that is, not all people who nearly die have an NDE. You want to make that distinction. Some people who come close to death, it'll change their life because it scares the daylights out of them. So, but they don't have an NDE. They don't have a near-death experience. Some they flatline and other things, but they don't have this broader awakening. So not everybody that has it, they don't know why that is. They think about 3% of the people that have cardiac arrest will have an NDE, and nobody knows why that is. But though life can be a struggle, those who have faced death accompanied by an NDE often experience a childlike rebirth. They gain a new perspective, shedding many of their self-imposed limitations. Most find a renewed zest for life. Nearly all lose their fear of death, which in turn eliminates their fear of life itself. So most come back a different person, and their families will tell them this. People that are close to them will say, you're different. Something's different about you. And they may not always even know that they're different, but they usually do. They know they've had a different experience that they can't really explain to people. But we are a lot more than we think. And we're a lot more right now than we think. And I don't think that we can work real hard to make ourselves break into that awareness. And I'm not sure what that veil is. I'm not sure what creates that barrier between who we are at the deepest level and what we think we are. But there must be some reason it's there. Maybe we just couldn't function well if we were in that state of mind all the time. I don't know. They say it takes 7 to 10 years after a near-death experience to adjust to your life, your daily life. People have a hard time fitting back in. And it's because, the astronaut that walks on the moon, he's been changed, has an experience like nobody else. Very few people have had that. So you can't talk to your next door neighbor about it, or your wife, or your, anybody you know. In her New Thought classic, The Game of Life and How to Play It, Florence Scovel Shinn points out that life is not a battle of us against the world, but rather a game of giving and receiving. What we give to the world, we receive back, whether that be the dark weight of fear and inhibition or the freedom of joy and empowerment. And this will be a universal message you'll hear from people who have that experience. They come back. They become givers. They become more aware of how they're giving, how they're coming across, how they're paying attention to people. Are they really there in that relationship? And it's a born-again experience. It truly is. This segment of life we are living now is our opportunity to discover how to do it well. If we have descended into a rut of the mundane, it may be time to give to the world a new message. It may be that our purpose for incarnating was to prove to ourselves that we could do it successfully. The good news is that the only time we can deal with this matter of life and death is in each moment. Do this one right and you've got it. Okay? Pretty simple. Why is it so hard to be here now? Why is it so hard to just be? Say, I'm here now. Do I have to deal with that guy I'm thinking about, that said whatever he said 5 years ago, 5 minutes ago? I'm here right now with you guys, in this experience. All I have to do is make this one successful, and the rest will take care of itself. Because I step into another one, same thing. It's the same thing over and over again. Can you be here now successfully? I think that's the real question. Very simple. A lot simpler than we make it. So I think that's a good reminder, don't you? Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Thanks again for your interest in Independent Unity, and have a wonderful week.